Hello dear friends, and today I have prepared for you a very interesting video. In it, I have collected all the latest information about the new part of Poppy Playtime. Be sure to watch this video till the end to be up to date with all the news. Well, I suggest you don't delay and get started as soon as possible. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the release of Chapter 4. So recently I came across a very interesting video that looks a lot like a trailer for the new chapter. Yes, most likely it is a fan-made trailer, but you must agree that it looks very high quality and believable. As for the official trailer for the game, I think that we should expect it very soon, because even the developers are already starting to warm up the interest to the new chapter, releasing various interviews and sharing the news in their Discord channels. And of course, we shouldn't forget about beta tests, which Mob Entertainment is already conducting and doesn't hide it from us. And just recently, an amazing leak has appeared on the internet that refers us to Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. The most amazing thing is that we are almost directly told about the release date, and also we see who will be the main character of the new chapter. However, there's still a good chance that this is just a fan work, but let's try to talk to you about the real release date of Chapter 4 and also discuss all the details that may be related to it. The exact release date of the new chapter of Poppy Playtime we certainly don't know yet. However, we can make an assumption, which will be based on the release dates of the previous versions of the game. So let me remind you that Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 was released on October 12th, 2021, and almost 6 months later, Mob Entertainment presented the second version of the game. But the gap between Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 and Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 is much longer, because the third part was released only on January 30th, 2024, which means the break between the release of the games was almost 2 years. But you can ask a reasonable question, and why such a big break? And now I will try to answer. As you may have noticed, Mob Entertainment has a tendency to increase the size of the chapters, because the second chapter was larger than the first, and the third is much larger than the second. There is an assumption that this trend will continue, and the duration of Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 will be even longer, and probably will be about 5 hours. But that's not all. There is one interesting detail, which for some reason is not noted by most fans of the game. This detail is that during the creation of the third chapter, Mob Entertainment Company left a number of developers, which greatly complicated and most likely delayed the release of Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. Well, that brings us to the big question. So when can we expect Chapter 4 to be released? My guess is that we should expect the new chapter by the end of 2025 or even early 2026. But do not be sad, because the new version is likely to be much more interesting than all the previous ones. In my opinion, we will expect a huge number of new locations, also a lot of new interesting riddles that we will have to guess together with you. Yes, of course, perhaps the game will be released earlier, but so far, based on all the information we have and analyzing it, we can only conclude that the game should be expected in late 2025 or early 2026. Now, I suggest we talk about the characters we expect to see in Chapter 4. Now it's time to talk about one of the most anticipated characters we haven't seen yet, and I'm talking about the very cute dinosaur Brawn. Many people were sure that Brawn would appear in Chapter 3, because in the first teaser trailer after the severed body of Mommy Longlegs, we were shown Brawn's head. But as we already know, the main antagonist of Chapter 3 is not Brawn at all, and I'm sure Brawn is the most desirable character we've seen so far. And it's probably time to tell us more about this dinosaur, especially since his life story in Playtime Co. is very fascinating, and it would be interesting to know how it will affect Brawn in the future. In case you don't know, Thomas Clark, a 59-year-old full-time employee of Playtime Co., was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. After receiving the diagnosis, he willingly volunteered to be part of the Bigger Bodies experiment. Scientists placed his organs, eyes, and brain inside a Brawn toy in what became known as the 1199 experiment. He was severely disoriented and did not know where he was or what had happened to him. When 1199 was introduced to the other experiments, they immediately realized that he was not an orphan forced to be an experimenter. As a result, Boxy Boo almost completely ate his vocal cords and thyroid gland before the research team intervened to stop the experiments from killing Brawn. It took 12 hours of surgery to stabilize Brawn's condition. He was then placed in solitary confinement to protect him from further experiments. And since we've already talked about Boxy Boo, I think it's time to give this character some attention, because he, like Brawn, is the monster that a lot of people want to see in the new chapter. Boxy Boo was one of the characters we see on that very ominous tape, The Hour of Joy. Boxy Boo is one of the main monsters whose death we haven't seen yet. Yes, in the previous versions of the game we saw the death of characters like Huggy Waggy, Mommy Longlegs, and of course the main character of the third part of Poppy Playtime, Catnap, and we shouldn't forget his former friends from Smiling Critters who died at his hands. So for now, Boxy Boo is one of the few surviving characters we haven't seen yet. So we can expect him to appear in all likelihood. My opinion about Boxy Boo is that I would be happy to see him in the new version of the game, if only the developers could introduce him into the story and make his existence in the game as interesting as possible. So here I am thinking that in Chapter 4, we will be able to see a huge version of Picky Piggy that will be very bloodthirsty. Apparently his huge size is due to the fact that he ate smaller monsters and thus reached this size. I have seen a video in which Picky Piggy is chasing our character. I can only assume that he is chasing in order to eat him, but I think that Picky Piggy expects the same fate as the other bosses of the game. Namely, he will simply fall into the hands of Prototype after his death and will bring his plan closer to fulfillment. The next character we might see as a boss in Chapter 4 might be Kickin' Chicken. From his cardboard in the 3rd chapter, we learn that he wants to escape from Playcare, because he can no longer stand all these horrors that are happening here. But what if he succeeded and we can see him in the 4th chapter? Most likely he will also be big, and I dare say he will not be very kind to us, so we'll have to hide from him. I also came across an excerpt that shows Kickin' Chicken chasing after our character, as a result of which Kickin' Chicken will die and his body will be taken away by Prototype, as it happened with bosses from other chapters. There is also a possibility that we will see Kickin' Chicken in conjunction with his brother Crocky Rocky, and maybe they will be the key figures in Chapter 4. Maybe from them we can find out what really happened to all the orphans in Playcare, and also find out what happened to the rest of the smiling critters. Another character I'd like to talk about would be Snidey Spidey. He is a spider who is an experiment of the Bigger Bodies Initiative. I got a glimpse of his cardboard, from which we can learn some interesting things, namely that he is a member of the Smiling Critters, and he tells us that he loves to scare others and that it makes his blood boil. Creepy, isn't it? In my opinion, Snidey Spidey is a great fit for the role of Prototype's main sidekick in the 4th installment of the game. I also think that he will have some kind of superpower, and judging by the fact that he is a spider, this superpower will be a spider web, which will be a trap for our character. So, recently I found a very interesting passage where our beloved Dog Day kills Snidey Spidey and then passes out. But then Mr. Delight comes to our rescue, and we transport the exhausted Dog Day to the hospital to help him recover. The funny thing is that in the hospital there is a cardboard Snidey Spidey who was killed by Dog Day a couple of moments ago. So while Mr. Delight is helping our comrade Dog Day, our character decides to walk around the hospital and suddenly we notice the silhouettes of the already, known to us, green rabbit. But the funny thing is that she is running away from us, not the other way around. Our character decides to catch up with her and find out what is going on here. Let me tell you right away, it was not an easy task, because even from the cartoon about smiling critters, we can understand that Hoppy Hopscotch is very active and energetic. But when our character does manage to do so, we find Hoppy Hopscotch in a lighted room, huddled in a corner. And then she tells us that she is afraid of the dark, because when it gets dark, some unexplainable things happen to her, and that she is always hiding in this room, because it is the only place in the whole hospital that is constantly and well lit. But suddenly there are some interruptions with light, and Hoppy Hopscotch, with an alarming voice, asks our character to leave her as soon as possible, because now something terrible can happen, and then we see Hoppy Hopscotch get some demonic form, and our character has to run away from her. By the way, a useful tip for players. At this point, you will need a flare gun hand from the 3rd chapter with charges of fire, because it is light will help to drive away the demonic Hoppy Hopscotch. A little bit away from Hoppy Hopscotch, we meet Mr. Delight, who has come up with a plan to help Hoppy Hopscotch. The plan is to activate the generators that are located throughout the hospital and lure the demonic form of Hoppy Hopscotch into the hallway of the hospital, because that's where the most light is. Immediately, our character begins to execute Mr. Delight's plan. Mr. Delight's plan comes to fruition by scaring off Hoppy Hopscotch with flare gun charges. When our character activated all the generators and brought Hoppy Hopscotch to the lobby of the hospital, Mr. Delight was already waiting for us there. But to our great regret, the plan didn't work, and the demonic form of Hoppy Hopscotch didn't disappear. And then Mr. Delight decides to throw a tranquilizer spear at her, which according to him will disable Hoppy Hopscotch and give us some time to fix the lights in the whole hospital. But then comes Dog Day, who tells us one interesting detail, namely that all smiling critters have nightmare mode in order to scare away any strangers on Playcare territory. But luckily he knows how to deactivate this mode, but he doesn't tell us how, because time is running out and it's time to get down to business. So our character goes to look for energy blocks, the same ones we used when escaping from Miss Delight. After collecting all the necessary blocks and bringing them to the necessary place, Dog Day explains to Hoppy Hopscotch that her nightmare mode is broken and she can't control it anymore, and that the only way to get rid of it is to send a powerful electric shock through her body, which will destroy it. Hoppy Hopscotch agrees to this experiment because she can't live like this anymore and is willing to do anything to get rid of nightmare mode. Then Mr. Delight launches a powerful electric shock at her. Luckily, everything was successful. The only downside is that Hoppy Hopscotch has a temporary headache, but it will soon pass. And then Hoppy Hopscotch remembers about his friend Bobby Bear Hug and tells us that she is still alive and that she is locked up. Hoppy Hopscotch also asks us to help her immediately and tells us that she is in jail. This is where our character immediately rushes to Bobby Bear Hug's aid. Once in the prison-like room, in a cage we see Bobby Bear Hug, who after a couple of moments becomes enraged and takes out the cage, fleeing in an unknown direction. Exploring this location, we get to a certain room, where we are attacked by the same Bobby Bear Hug. But then Hoppy Hopscotch, who already knows us, intervenes and stands up for us. But as a result of this fight, Hoppy Hopscotch was very badly hurt and lost consciousness. And then the most interesting thing happened. Prototype showed up, and as it turns out, Bobby Bear Hug is his assistant. However, later we managed to find Hoppy Hopscotch safe and sound, and together with Mr. Delight, we continue our adventure. Exploring further the territory of Playtime Factory, we managed to find one very interesting character, namely Bubba Bubba Fant. As far as we can see, he is not a bit damaged and very well preserved. Bubba Bubba Fant was happy to our character and Mr. Delight, but the same cannot be said about Hoppy Hopscotch, because immediately after their meeting, Bubba Bubba Fant threw her into the wall and was very aggressive towards her, despite the fact that Hoppy Hopscotch offered to help him. Next, our character and Mr. Delight suggest that Bubba Bubba Fant join an alliance to defeat Prototype, but all we hear in response is laughter. Bubba Bubba Fant then flees in a direction unknown to us. Our character then enters a new location where we meet one of the main antagonists of Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, namely Catnap. Here we see a fight between Catnap and Bubba Bubba Fant, at the end of which Prototype appears and grabs Bubba Bubba Fant. From their conversation, we learn that Bubba Bubba Fant also serves Prototype, but Prototype didn't like his disobedience, but decided not to kill him, but to take away one of his hands so that he wouldn't do it in the future. Remember that at the beginning of this video we talked to you about Picky Piggy and that she died at the hands of Prototype, but it's not that simple. After the conversation between Bubba Bubba Fant and Prototype, we turn around and see a furious Picky Piggy jumping out of one of the containers, and then Hoppy Hopscotch comes to our rescue and fights with Picky Piggy. But it's worth noting one peculiarity, namely that Picky Piggy now spits some green liquid, which looks like acid, because one such spit at Hoppy Hopscotch ate her leg, which prevented him from continuing the fight. But suddenly Prototype intervened again and ordered Picky Piggy to stop, because Hoppy Hopscotch would still need it. From all this we can conclude that Prototype doesn't kill monsters, but subdues them to serve him and help him with his plan. Baby Longlegs may also appear in the new chapter, and considering the fact that we haven't seen him yet, I'm sure his appearance is almost certain. But as what kind of character? Whether he'll be positive or negative is hard to say. On the one hand, his mother died because of us, but there is also a Prototype who took her body and who knows what he is doing with it. However, I'm more confident that Baby Longlegs will be on the side of the Prototype, because as we know, the Prototype is very good at subduing monsters, and it's very easy for a grief-stricken Baby Longlegs to make Baby Longlegs think that we killed his beloved mother. I think if he does appear, we will see him closer to the end of the 4th chapter, maybe even before we meet the Prototype himself. And now I propose to talk about Prototype and how it can look like, because since the release of the 3rd part, it's been a long time, and there are already a lot of theories about its appearance. However, I have chosen the most interesting ones for you. On the first leak, we were shown a warehouse that will be one of the locations of Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, but more importantly, we were shown the body with the already known hand and the side of the Prototype's face, and by the looks of it, his body will be huge, but if you think that's it, you're wrong. In the second leak, we can see the full face of the Prototype, and judging by the first 2 leaks, we can safely assume that the Prototype is not entirely made up of monsters that are taken away. And given the fact that we can clearly see human features, I have a hunch that the Prototype is one of Playtime Co.'s employees. On the 3rd leak, we once again realize how huge the Prototype will be, and we also finally understand what shape its body will be. But what I am more interested in is some toy on its hand, and most likely it's one of those evil smiling critters toys, namely the Bobby Bear Hug toy. Well, on the 4th leak we see nothing new except that on top of the Prototype's body, there is Boxy Boo's body. It is still unknown if this is a real character or just a toy that looks like him, but based on what we know about the Prototype, I would venture to guess that it is Boxy Boo. I'd like to tell you about a new hand for our character, which we are very likely to see in Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. This hand will be called Tesla Hand, and on the internet, I even found a tutorial on how to use it, so I suggest you figure it out together. The Tesla Hand is a modified green hand that can store 3 electrical charges. In order to charge it, we need to touch the source. We can apply these charges to the Tesla pillar, so when we activate it, we turn on all electrical appliances within a radius of 50 meters. Also in the manual, we are warned that we chose the targets wisely, because if you apply these charges to a person, it can kill him. I think this is a hint that with the help of this hand, we can neutralize monsters. Even if not kill them, at least incapacitate them for a while. Now let's talk about the others. And of course I'm talking about the dash hand. Let's go back to the moments when we need to use the power of our hand to climb up. However, this action is only realized in the vertical plane, which has always seemed strange to me. I'm talking about why the authors still haven't done something similar so that we can move horizontally in the same way. And that's exactly what dash hand will be able to do. I'm sure that such an ingenious solution can help us a lot in speeding up the game, and it is also important to realize that with the help of dash hand, we will be able to move absolutely anywhere. But there is one very important exception. Dash hand will be safe for us only when we see this picture of a red hand with a grabber. And if we just touch a random wall and try to move thanks to dash hand, of course we will do it, but the consequences will be very sad for us. And let's talk about the red slingshot hand. I think you all realize that the main mechanism is based on the principle of a catapult or slingshot. And just like the gun hand, this hand has a certain number of charges, but what it can inflict is green paint from the balls. But it seems to me that it's some kind of acid that acts on living flesh. And one of the most interesting to me is the fire hand. If you look closely, you will notice that this hand contains a huge amount of small details. It is important to note that the main feature of this hand is that it can shoot fire. Remember the fragment where we paralyze Catnap with an electric charge, and if you think that the effect of our fire hand will be the same, you are very wrong. The whole point of that hand is that we can just scare monsters away or hurt them a little bit, but we cannot kill anyone with that hand. And then there's another reference from Chapter 3. The gun hand has a certain number of charges, and then we have to wait to shoot again. And our fire hand will have the same mechanism, but we won't be able to use it forever because the gas we use is stored in a cylinder that will be attached to our back, and once the gas runs out, our hand will just be useless, and we'll probably throw it away. Another very interesting discovery will be the so-called power hand. And again, if you look closely, this hand will have the same feature as the previous one with a reference to reloading as a handgun. However, the power hand will still have the same mechanism, and you can see that the maximum charge is 5. Now let's get more detailed. We will have 5 levels of charge, and if our charge will be at 1, the strike power of the power hand will be no different from the regular hand and maybe even weaker. However, we all know that there are doors in the game that are impossible to open, or vice versa, to raise or lower our normal hand, and in this case power hand will come to our aid. Having accumulated the maximum charge, we can easily knock down this door. Or remember the place with the ducks. For us, they were nothing more than scenery that we couldn't interact with. But if Power Hand had appeared in Chapter 4, it would have been much easier because this powerful hand has the ability to move heavy objects. And of course, Power Hand can also help us a lot when fighting bosses. I do not think it can kill someone big, but it can stun them for a while or knock them back quite realistically. But with bosses as big as Miss Delight, it will be a lot easier because Power Hand will not be able to kill them so much, but it will be able to hurt them very badly. My personal opinion is that the next hand is the craziest, but also the most interesting concept, and we will talk about the Do hand. It doesn't have any super features like the Fire hand, but its main feature is to split it into several mini hands. And this is much more interesting, because now we will be able to use 3 hands at the same time. And agree that sometimes during the passage of Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, it was just vital for us to save precious time. Imagine that now we will be able to connect to several transmitters at the same time, which will make our progress through Chapter 4 much easier and more interesting. However, it is important to realize that Do hand, like all hands, has its drawbacks. And in the case of the Do hand, it will be useless to us when moving or in situations where we need to turn on or pull something. I think many of you know that thanks to the purple hand, we can jump much higher than the main character can in a normal situation. However, it is not always possible to find the purple marker that makes all this possible, and just to exclude such unfortunate situations and can be introduced Winged Hand. This hand gives us the ability to jump 2 times higher than it happens during normal play. But what if in addition to that we have a marker on the ground, thanks to which, when using the Winged Hand, we can lift so high that even the highest play care point will be an easy task for us. Or I have another suggestion. Maybe the winged hand will have another dizzying feature in addition to all of the above, and I'm talking about flying. Yes, you are right. Flying around the map. Without any mods and just during the normal passage of a new chapter. But there is a catch. We can only use flying once during the whole game, and as soon as the time we can fly is over, the winged hand just disappears and we can never use it again. And in order to recharge it for flight, we will have to find a secret box with a special device, and it will not be as easy as many might think. If I'm right, the winged hand will probably be the most coveted target for many Poppy Playtime players. We have just discussed the winged hand that can help us jump, and what if they add a hand that allows us to run much faster than the player himself? Even if we use acceleration, it cannot always help us to escape from the monster, but if we use the speed hand, such a task becomes much easier to implement. The mechanism of this hand is very simple. We just have to put it on, and that's it. Thanks to Speed Hand, we will be able to move around in places 3 or even 4 times faster than now, even using acceleration. But again, Speed Hand has its drawbacks. Of course, this hand will not disappear and we will be able to use it from the moment we find it until the end of the game, but at the same time, its charge will be limited. I think we will be able to use Mega Acceleration for 15-20 seconds, and then we will have to wait about a minute or maybe 2 minutes for the Speed Hand to become active again. And now I want to introduce you to the strongest hand of all the hands that have been in the video and the ones I haven't told you about yet. Meet the Strike Hand. It may be similar in strength to the Power Hand, but if the Power Hand can be used mainly to open and close iron doors, then the Strike Hand is what we have been missing for a long time. But first, we need to clarify that in order to use this hand, we need to use the charging station where we get our wall-piercing charges. I believe the maximum number of charges will be 5. And after charging our strike hand, we can easily break through any wall and move on. The strike hand can also be used against bosses, and since we already know that this hand will be the most powerful of all, it is likely that bosses like Miss Delight will be easy prey for us. But it is important to realize that even though the strike hand is very powerful, it still has its own durability, and it will break after a certain amount of breaking walls. I think the maximum limit of the strike hand will be about 25 uses, after which we can lose it forever. The next hand is no less interesting, the Harpoon hand. This hand itself consists of 2 parts, which we will have to look for in Chapter 4. But believe me, this hand deserves that we tried and found both the hand itself and the harpoon, which will actually be the basis of the action of this hand. What is the main point of this hand? An ordinary hand will be no different from the blue hand and will be the most ordinary part of our body, but once we find the harpoon, it will be much more interesting. Just like the fire hand, the main part of the harpoon will be attached to the back of our main character, and the tip itself will be attached to the hand. And there are only 2 ways to use this arm. Firstly, its main purpose will be faster movement of our character thanks to the ability to attach to the wall and be held in it. Now we won't need special elevators or devices for our arm to fix itself, and we will be able to climb up. It will be enough to shoot from the harpoon hand, and we will be able to reach any point on the map. I agree that this will improve the game a lot, and of course we could theoretically use this hand as a weapon, but except for a small wound, it is unlikely that it can harm our monsters in any way. And the last hand for today will be the healing hand, which will be the key to a small change in the mechanics of Poppy Playtime. We all know that we can't just get wounded and die after a failure or too close encounter with a boss. What if in the new chapter we can still get wounded and only after 2-3 wounds we finally die? And because of this innovation will appear Healing Hand, which just like Harpoon Hand will consist of 2 parts. Only in the case of the Healing Hand it will be the hand itself and the heart that will heal us. And to find this hand, we will first have to find the key to the healing box, where 2 parts of the new hand will be hidden. However, it will always be necessary to remember the charge of our heart, because once it drops to 0, this hand will simply disappear. Therefore, it is important to always think about it and constantly look for different charging stations to constantly feed energy to our favorite healing hand. Well, of course, 1 healing will be equal to 1 charge, and since our passage was not too easy, I think that the developers will make the maximum number of charges about 4 or maximum 5. Which of these leaks did you enjoy the most? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments. That's all for today, dear friends. See you soon. Bye-bye.